This is episode 18, recorded on July 1st, 2021. My guest today is Rabbi Ruth Sohn, the director of the Leona Aronoff Rabbinic Mentoring Program at Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles. Rabbi Sohn was educated at Yale University and received her rabbinical ordination at Hebrew Union College as well. She's held many leadership roles in the Jewish community, including at Columbia University and Boston University. Rabbi Sohn lived in Cairo with her family on two different occasions and wrote a book about it called Crossing Cairo, an account of her family's experiences living in Egypt as religious Jews. She is also an experienced teacher of Jewish meditation and mindfulness practice. I was honored to speak with her and benefit from her teachings. I know you will feel the same way too. It's Not What You Think podcast is available on YouTube and Spotify, so please like, comment, share, or subscribe on your favorite platform. That support is enough to continue to allow us to produce this show. Our interviews are with people who may have opinions different from what yours or mine are, so while we keep an open mind, just remember, it's not what you think. Great. Welcome, Rabbi Ruth Sohn, to It's Not What You Think. Thanks for being on the show. I'm very excited that you're here. How was your week so far?
My week so far has been great. And Morty, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm looking forward to this, and
Good.
I appreciate the opportunity.
No pressure, though. No pressure on me that you have these high expectations.
Okay, no pressure on you. Let's have a conversation.
There we go. So the Judaism you practice is Reform Judaism. Can you describe for those of us that don't know what that means?
Okay, so the Judaism I practice, I like to say, is Judaism. It's, I'm a little resistant to the labels and all of the different categories, although I think the way I often put it, and this is actually what I'm most comfortable with, is I'm in the movement or the group of Jews who really love to spend time with and learn from all different kinds of Jews. And that's really the truth. That is, I really have enjoyed and continue to want to spend time with more traditional Jews, less traditional Jews, all different kinds of Jews. And my current job working at Hebrew Union College, working with rabbinical students in the Reform movement, I was actually ordained in 1982 by the Reform movement. I grew up in the Reform movement. That's been my primary affiliation, you're right. But this current job is the first time I'm actually working for the Reform movement. I became a rabbi primarily with the goal. I went to rabbinical school to learn more, and thinking I wanted to work with college students, which is what I did for the first leg of my rabbinic career, 10 years working on two different universities, Columbia and BU, and Boston University. I've been in environments with all different kinds of Jews, teaching, counseling, etc. And the Chavurah movement, which is something that is also non-denominational, really. Jews who are interested in real spirituality, justice in the world, connecting, spirituality that affects how we live in the world, that makes a difference in how we live, that asks something of us. That's what I've been interested in, and again, with all different kinds of Jews. But to answer your question, Jews span an incredible spectrum of approaches to Jewish tradition and Jewish law. And I'm part of the community of Jews who look to tradition and look to the evolution of law, take it really seriously, but don't feel bound legally by it. Serious guidance, but actually not maintaining a certain degree of autonomy and for the community and the individual. I'm actually not hearing you.
That's me. So
okay.
when I have my production crew consisting of 4 dogs barking in the background, I have to go on mute.
Got it.
And then I always forget to turn it on.
And then you have to remember, but we don't always. Yeah.
So I'm hearing 2 things. One is it's very practical. Meaning what you do is I want it to be practical. It's not just some kind of theoretical
Mhm.
structure. So practical is number one. Number two is when you have the letter of the law and the spirit of the law,
Mm.
you tend to follow more the spirit of the law when you have to make a decision. So and I love that. And just so you can be assured, in the introduction to this podcast, I definitely go through your background at Boston
Mm.
University and Columbia University, and your
Uh-huh.
ordination from HUC and all that. So you don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
The, by the time folks are
Not worried.
watching this, they will have heard that already.
I see. Okay. Okay. So
The
you
magic
can
of
edit and take that out, I
there
guess.
you go. No
Yeah.
problem. So, do
Yeah.
you remember the first time you either? I know you do meditation, and we'll talk more about that. But the first time you either tried to meditate, or the first time you started going down the spiritual path, and I know that might be two different experiences.
Okay. Those are two different
Right. I
experiences.
figured. That's why I made it. It's a
Um,
hard question. I got two different
mm,
things, two timelines going on there.
okay.
Take whichever one you want.
So in some ways, the easier one is the meditation one. The first time when I started meditating, it was actually on the with the consciousness of that's what I was doing. Um,
Right.
it was actually about 30 years ago, and I
Wow.
really didn't know what I was doing,
Wow.
but I actually focused on the breath and on Yud He Vav He
Hmm.
as letters of probably the most mysterious of Jewish names for God, often pronounced Adonai, translated as the Lord. A dear friend and colleague, Nachum Ward-Lev, Rabbi Nachum Ward-Lev, translates that as the living presence, which is what I tend to use now when I can. But it's letters that are like, if you try to pronounce them, it comes out like a breath.
Hmm.
Um, and anyway, I did my own thing for a long time. Actually, then this relates to the podcast name. The first time, maybe 20 years ago, when I sat down with Rabbi Jonathan Omerman, one of my teachers over the years of meditation practice in Los Angeles. The first time I met with him, he sent me out to look at his license plate at a bumper on his car for a moment, which said meditation dot dot dot. It's not what you think.
Right.
And he meant it by the double entendre,
Hmm.
that it's not what people think it is, what we assume it is often, but it's also not about thinking. And he wanted me to see that because he felt what I was doing was too much about thinking. And I was getting lost I was kind of going off and it was ceasing to be meditation, which is, he was right, I think. But at
No
any
pun
rate,
intended, I think.
right, but I struggled for many years actually without teachers, just trying to figure it out on my own because of where I was in my life as a mother with young children and working and not getting myself to teachers. But I finally did work with wonderful teachers like Rabbi Jonathan Omerman, Sylvia Borstein, and
Sure.
others. And, and I would say of all I'm really into a variety of practices of meditation and prayer, primary among the formal spiritual practices. But meditation really is, if I had to just pick one, and thank God I don't, it would be meditation. That is really my grounding practice,
So,
mindful,
yeah.
what I consider Jewish mindfulness meditation practice.
Now, what's also interesting to me is um, I never looked at Judaism as having a strong meditation practice. And now, this very moment, and of course, now that I've done all my research and interviewed several other rabbis, it clearly has a strong meditation practice. And I find it unfortunate that more people don't know that. I'll give you a simple
I
reason. If
agree.
I knew that 30, 40 years
Hmm.
ago, I'm a practicing Buddhist and very happy that I am. I probably would have making a left turn instead of a right turn. So that's part one. Part two, when a delegation of rabbis met with the Dalai Lama in the 90s, one of the issues that were raised were, hey, we're losing some of our people to Buddhism. It's a problem for us. And the Dalai Lama had several answers for them. One answer was, well, we have a very strong esoteric tradition, and my sense is people are coming over for that reason. And I know that Judaism has that, but maybe you're not sharing it as much as you can. Maybe you're holding on too tight to it. And I remember growing up learning certain things in yeshiva, and certain things that said, oh, no, we can only teach you that when you're 40 years old. So he identified that as an issue. And since then, every public speaking engagement that I go to where the Dalai Lama is there, he makes a point of saying, hey, if you have another religion, please stay with it. If there's something that we're doing that you like, then please take it. But please do not convert to Buddha. This is what he said. I've heard him say it at least 3 or 4 times already. It's very powerful because he's not, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, I don't care about labels. I don't care about categories. I don't care what name you're calling it. And some of his best friends are Christians and Muslims and Jews and all that. So that's part one or part two. And then, so any thoughts on that before I ramble on more?
No, I think I very much resonate with what you're saying. I think in my growing up too, what Judaism was I didn't get the full spiritual depth of Judaism as a child. Even though I did have some really positive experiences, even of prayer and study, thank goodness. But I was, when I felt in college, when I felt that I was really a spiritual seeker, I realized that I'd kind of left that part of myself behind when I went to college, and I wanted to explore it. And my first thought was to look at Eastern tradition, to check out Buddhism. And I felt that because of my family history, my parents and my whole family surviving the Shoah and that background, the Holocaust in the background, I felt like I really owed it to my past to check that out once more before turning to something else. And I found not meditation, but Torah study as incredibly compelling. And the community experience of study and prayer and depth that I didn't realize was there, and then got started. That really started me on an adult Jewish learning
Very lucky
journey that
Right.
was really compelling. But I too would have benefited by being introduced at that point to meditation. And it took, another few decades before I got there.
Right. So you're very lucky.
I am very lucky. I agree.
I don't know what percentage, but I'd say a lot of people are not that lucky.
Absolutely.
And they go elsewhere, or they just get lost.
That's right.
And it's not just meditation. I don't want to focus. I mean, I'm big on meditation, and you love it. I don't necessarily have to focus on that because this is meditation, and this is Judaism. This is meditation, and this is Buddhism, et cetera, et cetera. That's just one of many tools that are beautiful and that really work well.
Right.
The other thought I had, though, is that for many years you did not have a teacher of meditation. You were kind of just trying to figure it out yourself.
Right.
Is that?
And I did have other things like small prayer community of different chavarot that I was very actively engaged in. Nigunim, singing, prayer, chants that really were a vehicle. My time in nature, physical activity, music, all sorts of things, and some deep prayer experience. But meditation, I have to say, mindfulness meditation practice, I really found transformative when I started engaging with it. And frankly, even with years of therapy, significant therapy, I found mindfulness meditation practice paying attention to our experience and in certain ways becoming aware of habits of mind that we take as truth, as absolute at times, when they're really not. They're old habits that
Crazy.
there's no reason for us to give so much power to them. And I found that incredibly liberating. And compassion, I honestly think compassion for the self is in many ways compassion for others. I find a lot of us have an easier time into that than compassion directed toward the self and being the giving of love. But what about the receiving of love and being really capable of both and open to both deepening? I find the gift of offering people the invitation into self-compassion is often the most radical of what I offer.
I couldn't agree with you more. So there's a few things. One is when you mentioned that you had these other practices, whether it was singing, nigun, singing, or being part of a group, chavurot, et cetera, that supported you, or walking in nature. I don't even know who the we is anymore, regard all that as meditation. So when someone says to me, "Oh, I can't meditate," I say, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, I can't sit down." And I said, "Great, then don't sit down. Why don't you walk?" And when thoughts come in and out of your mind, whatever, meaning we can, or when you sing, "Are you busy thinking?" "No, I'm not." I said, "Well, that's meditation." So we kind of expand that. It makes it a little bit easier.
So what's your definition then of meditation?
I would say, well, and I hate to use the word success and failure. I hate both of those words. But if one is in the moment, the mind and the body is in the moment, and you can attempt to do that by sitting, watching your breath, by walking, by singing, et cetera, that's a form of meditation.
Okay, so that's interesting because I would say that's what all spiritual experience
Great,
is about.
I'm with you.
Shifting from constriction to expansiveness, from being distracted to being present,
right?
From being closed to being open. And thank God we have so many different ways of making that shift again and again. And really with spiritual practice, learning, coming to recognize when we're in one or when we're in the other, like when things tighten, when we tighten, when things are closing, realizing, there are options here. I can pause and do something to help myself come back, wake up again.
You are preaching to the
open up again.
You're preaching to the converted here. So, you mentioned earlier, we have these habits, and it's unfortunately a favorite topic of mine, is we have these habits, we have this way that we think and view the world, how we judge the world. And by the way, when I do that, I'm always right. I just want to put that out there. So let's just get that out of the way.
So glad.
Right. Just want to put that out there because it is my podcast after all. My, me, I. I like to get as many of those words out there as possible. And one of my favorite techniques for myself, and I teach others, and there's a billion techniques out there and they're all good, is when you have a habit and you're trying to break it, just come back to the moment, this moment, whether it's through breathing and observing that, or through just observing the stress, or, there's so many tools. But the beauty of that is you are breaking the habit that's been with us for 10, 20, 30, 50, 70 years, whatever it is. I'm 62. And it's not easy to do that. The best way that I know how to do that is come right here, right now to the present moment. And that breaks it. Is it going to break it forever? No.
You say, excuse me, when you say breaks it.
Breaks the habit. Helps to break the habit.
And what I'm understanding is interrupts the habit. Is that what you mean?
Interrupts the habit.
You're interrupting.
Yeah. Weakens the habit.
Yes. So interrupts and also weakens.
Correct. So I'm now thinking about, yesterday I should have said this to that person. I can't believe it. Or, oh my God, what am I going to do for money?
You too.
Tomorrow? Yeah.
That happens to you too.
It used to, not anymore. Not anymore. And or, well, what am I going to do for the bills next month? Or how am I going to do? Oh, this is not working out. Once that mind is in that kind of mentality, that is a habit. That we will call it creates negative karma. And therefore, we want to try to break that. And just like cigarette smoking, okay, I'm not going to smoke now. Well, that's great. Perfect. What about tomorrow? Next day. So it is a constant, and I hate to use the word battle, but it is a constant because I rather would use the word game. Battle sounds so, oh, I'm going to fight this battle. I'm
Yeah,
going to win.
right.
I teach people when they do this kind of thing, treat it like a game. It's very light. It's a happy thing.
So with likeness.
And that's
Yeah,
that. And it's like, I'm going to go back to my breath and da, da, da. And little by little over
yes,
time, it will weaken. It will fade. It may take a long time. Don't know,
yeah.
so,
So,
go ahead.
so I love what you're saying, Morty, and it reminds me of something I think I heard this from Sylvia Borstein. Everything we do contributes to one habit or another. So, like you're saying, a game. So we interrupt the habit, we notice and interrupt it. 1 point for noticing and interrupting and making a choice for something different. And then the next time it comes up, maybe we're more stressed out and we don't even notice and we get caught in that cycle. That's 1 vote on that side. So it's not a calamity. It's not like it's all over. It's one more vote on that side as opposed to this side. Everything we do, every choice we make contributes to one habit or another. So we can be successively over time strengthening new habits, changing, interrupting, and transforming over time our habits. But the other thing I learned that I find has been really, really helpful with regard to this is it doesn't have to go away completely, the old habits. It's being able to notice and interrupt is actually good enough. We might want it to go away, and some of them do over time, but some of them are so deeply ingrained. We just we just may they may never go away completely, but the truth is it doesn't really matter if we notice and can interrupt them.
Yeah.
And we
So I
have
would,
that capacity.
right. So I would even say that that would not be the goal. I agree with you. And I hate the words goal. I hate the word
Mm.
goal. I hate the word failure, success when involved with success, because because if you have a goal, that means that if you meet it, great. But if you don't meet it, then I don't know how
Terrible.
I feel. I feel bad. Or I met it this time, but not in the way that I thought I would meet it. So I don't like the word goal. But yeah, so I agree with everything you said. I'm going to tweak it a little bit, which is um, ha- from a Buddhist perspective, we try to reduce our habits, any habit, any form of grasping or attachment. There's only one kind of grasping or attachment that is, we'll call it acceptable, which is, I really want to help you.
Mm.
I really want to help you reduce your pain or your suffering. I really want to help you. That's okay. The only kind of habit that is acceptable and will reduce negative karma and increase positive karma. But if I have a habit of, instead of eating sugar, I'm going to eat broccoli. Well, one might say, if you're, oh, that's a good habit. And the answer to that is no habit that involves grasping and attachment, I don't
Mm.
care if it's broccoli or sugar, is a good habit.
What
What
about
do
a
you,
habit of sitting down for meditation practice at the beginning of the day?
okay? The question there is, how do you feel if you don't do it? If you feel like, oh, damn, I got to have that, if it's like that type of
Yeah,
mentality,
so an
if you're
attachment, that's
correct,
more than habit. That's really, I mean,
correct.
so yeah, maybe habit's not the best word. Practice, like I think practices are really helpful. Aspirations, practices, and the Jewish orientation would go further and say commitments and being really committed to certain practices. And that's going back to the letter of the law, the spirit of the law. There is something about submitting to something greater than oneself, to having a sense of there being things that are greater than ourselves, I think, sources of, a life force, a sense of what is right and wrong that's greater than ourselves, and sources of wisdom, love, and certain practices that are part of Jewish tradition, like Shabbat, the Sabbath, with certain restrictions that my understanding and lived experience of it is accepting the letter of the law with regard to certain things. I'm coming back to something you raised earlier, spirit of the law, letter of the law. The spirit of the law doesn't always trump the letter of the law for me. There's certain things where I've made a commitment. But I have to say, I am, over the years, returning more to my Reform roots, and the spirit of the law does win out if there is a conflict more often these days. But I do find some great value in with certain things, like the Sabbath, submitting to certain restrictions, that and having the experience of not being able to make choices about absolutely everything.
What's beautiful about what you're saying is, and I know what you're talking about because I remember when going to summer camp, the Sabbath, I went to Camp Ramah. The Sabbath was a really beautiful experience. Not when I was in Brooklyn, not when I went to yeshiva. And I think it came down to, without getting into too much detail, I think frankly it came down to a lot of reasons, but if I had to focus on one, it would be the mentality. The mentality was very much the letter of the law, and there's us and there's them, and not a lot of open-mindedness.
Yeah.
And that, to me, should be the crux of education, which I believe that I was not trained in that way, and which is a sense of love, compassion, and open-mindedness, not just for Jews, but for everyone.
Absolutely.
And that's unfortunate because the way you talk about the Sabbath, I can feel it. I love that. I'm ready to go. Where do we go for that? Can I buy some of that? And that's what it was like in the summer camp. So, it was also interesting in that meeting that the Dalai Lama had with the delegation of rabbis was one of the reasons he was very interested in Judaism at the time was because they had a large migration of refugees in late 1950s when China came in, and millions were killed and millions fled. And he was one of them, of course. And he was concerned, living in the diaspora, that what was going to happen to Tibetan Buddhism. So he looked to Judaism to see, well, these guys, they've been there, done that. Let me talk to them. And he asked them, how are you able to achieve that? How are you able to survive? And one of the answers was that, we have a lot of practices in the home. And, like Shabbat, Sabbath, meals, prayer, things like that, blessings of the children, et cetera, a long list. And and that had a large impact on him, I think. So it's interesting to tie that into what you're saying.
Yeah, and that is something I have found, and our kids have found really, really compelling. Passover, Seder, that is a home ritual, and actually is a beautiful example of what you're talking about, of bringing it lends itself to bringing other people in, and it's actually a requirement to open your doors and welcome people who are in need, and place for everybody at the table, and a role for everybody at the table, everybody contributing questions, perspective, wisdom from their experience, connecting to this incredible story of our past, the experience of having been oppressed, having been, slaves in Mitzrayim, the place of constriction.
Egypt.
Yeah. But the Hebrew is actually more universal, of a narrow place, a place of constriction, which I like to think of it that way, and not as you know, we lived for a period of time in Egypt.
Yep. That's
And I actually found it really confusing in some very powerful, beautiful way to say our prayers every morning in standing in Cairo.
crazy.
Um,
Crazy. So let me give a little
yeah.
background. So even though it's in the introduction to this podcast, so you lived in Cairo with your family about 2013 after the fall of Mubarak. President,
Actually, we lived there, if I can correct you,
please,
2006. Before,
2006.
that's when we were there for half a year.
Okay, my
A
apologies.
very important time, actually. A lot was going on there, prefiguring the overthrow in some ways of Mubarak, which happened in 2011. We were back 2011
Okay,
after the
got it.
revolution. So we lived there 2006. We were actually back, very important experience, 2007. And then in 2011 in the summer after the overthrow of Mubarak.
Okay, I love that. I'm glad you corrected me. Um, that's why I do the introduction to the podcast after the podcast.
Yeah.
So you wrote a book about some of that in books called Crossing Cairo, and I've heard you read from it. Beautifully written, of course. An account of your family's experience living in Egypt as religious Jews. And you were advised, at least on one of your trips, maybe all of them, not to share the fact that you're Jewish. And here we also have, your parents were Holocaust survivors from Germany, and you went back to live in Berlin at least twice. I think you're there right now as we speak to teach
Yeah.
rabbinical students. And in some cases, I think you know of or have seen experiences of anti-Semitic activity going on there, and of course, the rest of the crazy world we live in. So I'm super inspired by all of those trips. Why? Because that ain't easy in my mind. There's someone said to me, "Hey, you got to go to these, we'll call them hot spots, even though Berlin's not really a hot spot, but there's potential there." So is that a pattern in your life? Because most people go to Florida on their vacation, or I'm in California, and I have to go clean my pool later and make sure the chlorine's balanced. And you're going to Germany, and you're going to Cairo. So is that a pattern? Did you feel uncomfortable? How do you deal with it? I'm more interested in how you're dealing with discomfort.
So, great question. There is no question to do this stuff and to get something out of it. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And I will say that in Cairo, it was an amazing experience to live in Cairo. And we lived in a really nice neighborhood of Cairo. So we had beautiful surroundings in some ways, but I had to push myself every single day to go out, to interact. It was rich, but I had to push myself. Learning a language, and that was my real project there, learning Arabic. And I never thought of myself as particularly good at language, but I fell in love with Arabic. And I actually did an amazing job learning Arabic, partly because I already knew Hebrew. And just the poetry of the language, I really fell in love with the Arabic language. But talking with, whether it was cab drivers or people on the street or shopkeepers or whoever I was talking with, I sounded so stupid. I had to be willing to sound like a first grader or less, to sound like I couldn't have complex ideas because my language was so limited.
Right.
And I had to be willing to make mistakes and sound stupid. And that was really challenging. And for just being uncomfortable, hiding being Jewish, in so many ways, it was uncomfortable every step of the way. And it was incredibly rich. It was one of the most profound half years of my life. It was only half a year. And I would have signed up when we finished that. I really wanted to stay another couple of years because I felt like I was really speaking Arabic at that point and on a different level. And we reached this point. I really wanted to build on it. But I do think that the practices of things like meditation have really helped me lean into discomfort, whether, to notice when I'm avoiding something, avoiding a feeling of unease, anger, fear, whatever it is, I think that's, for me, that's been a really, and continues to be one of it's never over, but it's one of the best parts of the practice, that in the morning, I take time, I notice what is percolating in me,
What's going on?
I don't always wake up like, oh my God, another beautiful day. That's wonderful when it happens, but and if that happened all the time, we wouldn't need spiritual practice. But it's for all the other mornings.
Yeah.
And so I sit down and I have the chance to be with my body, for me, the best way is breath. What's going on in my body, physical sensations in my body, because my body knows the truth.
So
And to
no
sit
one
with
ever gets
that
drawn
is
to
comfort.
no one ever gets drawn to meditation because I feel great. Let me go learn how to meditate. It doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I have to say, there's resistance. There can be resistance every single day. Oh, I'm so sorry.
that's okay.
Whoops. Yeah.
So that's good.
There,
Good ringtone.
yeah. Thank you. Um, and Jay Michelson has, you know who he is? Jay
No.
Michelson has a really great piece called Letting the Yetzer Tov Win, and the Yetzer Tov, the good inclination. And
Yes.
he's, it's a brilliant piece because he talks about how, whether it's yoga or meditation or prayer or exercise, we know it's good for us and we know it's a great experience. And yet we may have to drag ourselves to that cushion every day. What's that about? And he suggests that it's precisely the I that needs to be transformed. It is transformative practice, but just going with what our heart pulls us to is not necessarily a good thing. So,
So I can assure you most mornings 80-90%, not that the number matters. It takes me a full hour, even hour and a half of meditation and yoga and other stuff before I could feel like, okay, this is me. But that
ready
moment I
to
get out
come
of
into the
bed, most of
day.
the time it's like because you're sucked back into that habit, it's that habitual thinking.
Yeah.
But whatever percentage it is, it's less and less and less than it was years ago.
That's true. And you know something? You're actually, some of the things that you have raised a little bit earlier, like those inner dialogues. I have to say, wow, I used to do that a lot more than I do now. Like those were, I would listen to those things.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh,
would get
totally.
caught in the
Hours and
spin of
hours.
them,
Yeah.
for, pulled down by them. And I won't say it never happens. That's not true, but it doesn't happen nearly as much. I'm gonna just turn this off so we don't have any more
So,
things you have to edit out.
nothing gets edited yet. So, the National Science Foundation, I've probably said this in two other podcasts, about 2 or 3 months ago, published something saying that they've done measurements that we think about 60,000 thoughts in a given day. And, it ranges, everyone's different. Me personally, I only think 3 or 4 thoughts a day, but folks, the other folks, not us, not me and you. But so I find that interesting. Okay, and I've done the math many times. My calculator, what does that come out to? And let's assume we're going to include dreams in that. I've done all that stuff. But the more interesting thing that I read from great masters is that and also National Science Foundation, 90 to 95% of those thoughts are the same from yesterday.
You're kidding.
Yeah. So that's and of
Oh my
course,
gosh.
and that's the real shocker,
Wow.
is that's that power of the habit.
Wow.
And the thoughts are always about, the future or the past.
Yes.
And my teacher says, which is a mantra that I repeat almost, many, many times a day is the past is history, the future is mystery, the present moment is a gift.
That's beautiful.
And so whenever I have that little thing going on, and not so little, that whiny record or recording going on, I go, the present moment is a gift.
Yeah.
And it's not just come back to the present moment to make that habit fade or whatever, but it's truly a beautiful gift that we have as humans to observe and recognize that and feel that. And whether you get it through sitting there with your eyes closed on a cushion, or you're singing, or you're praying, or you're reciting a Hebrew mantra, or et cetera, it's truly a gift. And it's just so, I have such great appreciation for that now. Why? Because it took me out of my my box of suffering or unhappiness. Something popped into my mind that, as well, that you mentioned earlier. When the Dalai Lama first came to this country, and people were telling him about, that people have this sense of self-hatred or depression or things like that, he didn't
He
understand
didn't even
that.
know. He turned to his interpreter, or right? It didn't compute.
Right, yeah, exactly.
He couldn't figure out.
So you've heard the story.
Self-loathing, I think the phrase was.
So, you've heard the story.
Had no idea what it was.
And that gets back to what you were saying earlier, which is this sense of self-compassion. I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but there's so much richness in what you're saying, which is, this whole concept of compassion for others. It's easy. Why is it hard for myself? Why? Maybe I don't value myself as much. Maybe I'm punitive. Maybe I think, it comes down to self-valuation, frankly, I think.
Right. I will share, this is really personal. I don't know if I've ever shared this.
Okay.
But sometime early on in my meditation training, my mindfulness meditation period, I was driving to work on the freeway in LA. It was a gorgeous morning, blue sky, sunshine, and I realized, oh my God. I mean, after like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. I realized, oh my God, I'm feeling such joy. And in the next instant, there was a squashing of it and a thought, you don't deserve this. And I caught it and I thought, oh, wow. And I realized that message was that was an old tape, but it was usually subterranean. I mean, I'm mixing metaphors. It was.
You would never know it's there. Without meditation,
usually it was operative without my even knowing it. And I mean, I was driving fast on the freeway. I couldn't just pull over and sit with that. But I got that, and I realized that's something for me to sit with and make space for, and that is something that is going to require some real healing. And it's not the kind of thing that I could then just sit with and offer healing. It's been, that's part of what spiritual practice, I think, over time involves. And other times, again, successive moments of noticing, interrupting, and in the moment offering healing for whatever, whatever caused that, whatever the evolution of that was. I used to, in my therapy days, I wanted to get at the root of everything, but I've actually come to see it really differently at this point, that can be really interesting, that can be valuable. It's not necessary, and it's not necessarily what's going to be helpful. I actually have found the practice of, for lack of better language, the noticing compassion practice that I've learned as part of Jewish mindfulness meditation practice has been, and another meditation, Buddhist meditation practice has been, as I've learned it from mostly Jews, but not only Jews.
Right. Sylvia Boorstein.
Right, and others.
Yes, of course.
But also Pema Chodron. I've never studied with her personally. I just love.
Incredible.
She speaks my language. She speaks the language of my soul, and just incredible. But others, we live in an age we can learn from, not just books, but just like what you're offering, online and podcasts and YouTube and all sorts of things. So I'm getting a little off track, but
So I want to get back to that moment because that moment was critical
that
for me.
was a painful moment and a
But
revelatory,
a beautiful
a
moment,
beautiful moment.
because as a
Yeah,
meditator, if you were not a meditator, the habit would have continued to have its impact on pushing you
absolutely.
down, and
Pounding.
you wouldn't
Yeah,
even know it. Most people walking around, if
yeah,
they're angry, they don't even know it. I'm sure I'm the same way in many ways. I'm not aware of everything that's going on, but the very virtue of the fact that you caught it, that's beautiful because you're a meditator. You were able to be aware of your thoughts. And as
right.
you alluded to, what we do now, once again, I don't know who the we is, but certainly me and you, it doesn't necessarily matter. I got that when I was 3 years old. My mother did this to me, and I was da da da. And when I went to school, the teacher. We can get into that, but we don't have to. We can just come back to the moment over time, over time, over time, and it fades. Having said that, there was she passed away, a great Zen master, female. Her name is Joko Beck from San Diego. Also studied in Los Angeles under the Japanese Zen tradition, and she had came up with a practice which was make a list of all the things that you were trained to do that were requirements in your life growing up as a child. So things that we pick up from our parents: always be on time, be a good girl, be clean, put your stuff away, organized, be polite, be quiet, don't be quiet, be assertive, whatever it was. Everyone's list is different. You got a list 20, 30 things of what was required or expected of you growing up as a child. And then she said, make another list. When you turned an adult, what's the list of requirements that you have for yourself as an adult? Oh, well, as an adult, be responsible, be responsive, be fair, be honest, be this, be that, be aggressive, don't be aggressive, whatever it was. And you look at those two lists, and a couple of things. One is some things on the list are actually in opposition to the other things on the list. These are the requirements that we have of ourselves, and I have different requirements. So one might be a little bit softer with yourself. Don't have to be on time all the time, Morty. Another one is be on time. So now when something on that list gets violated, either by me or someone close to me, what happens is, well, we get a negative state of mind: angry, irritated, annoyed, et cetera, et cetera. So what we can do when you talk about going back to therapy, I agree with you. I like the Buddhist Eastern methodology now, which is, hey, let's try to break the habit. But what she added that component to it, which is when you feel that you have a negative state of mind, irritation, annoyance, anger, jealousy, whatever it is, check to see, do a few things. One is interrupt it, do a couple of breaths, and then check to see which list it's on.
That's interesting.
And then over time, you'll start to see that whatever's on that list of requirements can never be satisfied 100% of the time. Because how do you even measure it? Being on time for me is different than being on time for you. If I'm married to you, I'm ready at 9:00 and you're there at 9:05. You're late. I'm irritated, annoyed. But when I'm there at 9:05, that's okay. When you're there, so this whole requirements that we set up for it. Meaning, I wanted to get back to your comment that you had that record playing of that quashed it. One could ask, if you made their lists, where'd that come from? I'm not saying you have to identify your second grade teacher that was mean to you. I'm not saying that, but it came from somewhere in our
That's the
past.
thing. I know it came from somewhere,
Right.
and um, Sylvia says something like, when you recognize these old tapes, you can even say, you served me well at some point in
Perfect.
my life, but
Perfect.
not anymore. No, thank you.
Right.
And
Beautiful.
I'm not gonna listen anymore.
Right. Absolutely. No.
So
Well
we don't
said.
have to get into contention with it. See, that's the other thing. One of our habits is we tend to really get into contention with our experience, pushing things away that are unpleasant, wanting to hold on to the things that really are pleasant, and things like that. But those are the two big ones, and catching ourselves and realizing, oh, wait a minute, I don't need to do this.
Yeah.
I will say there is a wonderful Jewish tradition of Musa. I don't know if anybody's talked about Musa with you in a podcast.
It's in my notes. It's coming up.
Okay.
We just so you know, I have 14 pages of notes. We're now
Oh
in the
my
middle of page.
gosh.
We're now in the middle of page 1.
So yeah, okay, got it.
I'm kidding. But go right ahead. We can jump.
So Musar, I think of Musar as applied mindfulness,
which means ethics. Which the English. Well, let's give the English translation.
Okay, so it means cultivating virtues.
Okay.
Or cultivating cultivating certain qualities of soul, certain characteristics, patience, humility, generosity in judgment. Did I say humility? Gratitude. All of these things that it's hard. It would be hard to find someone who would say, "Nah, no, thank. I don't want it. I don't want one of those.
I don't want any of that." Right.
These are. We would all agree these are really good qualities. We want to live this way, but with all of them, the question I think becomes, where's the rub? When is it hard to practice generosity? When is it hard for me to be patient? When is it, when am I challenged on the humility count? And what's really beautiful about this, some would say discipline, and actually that is what Musar is often translated as in Proverbs. It's translated as discipline. It's a practice of actually cultivating these things. That is what's so cool about it. Not just learning about it, studying, thinking about it, and not even just aspiring to, but having techniques and having actual practices to help us cultivate these qualities. So that it might include, in the way I like to practice it, is study with other people and conversation, and ideally having a buddy where we check in. I'm not actively doing it right now, and I miss it. I may teach a class, so I start back into the practice again, or just set up a chavruta, a study partner, relationship around Musar practice, because it's a lifetime, and it's just really wonderful to sort of have your mind have it on your radar that, okay, this week I'm going to really focus on the challenges and the opportunities for patience, and really grow that capacity in myself. Or Seder, organization, being more organized about my time and my space, declutter, putting all of that stuff in a spiritual practice context.
You can make a lot of money teaching people that. I'm joking.
Actually, it seems to be pretty universally popular.
It's very popular now. Yeah.
Because it makes a difference. People see that, oh my gosh, this is helping me live better, to live better, to live more engaged, to be more present, to be more engaged, to be more intentional, to be more the kind of person I want to be in my relationships.
It feels better.
With myself and others, yeah.
On its most basic level, it feels better when you see someone else that way, that's organized, and even if it's just physical organization, you say, "Oh, I like that. I want to be like that."
I have a funny thing to just add to this, which is living in Los Angeles when I was first doing Musar practice, whether the midah, the quality of the week, was compassion, loving kindness, patience, whatever it was, one of the best places for me to focus on was driving. Because driving provided so many opportunities for practice.
Absolutely.
And when I bring this up when I'm teaching, people laugh in LA, because It's so true. It's, the opportunities for generosity, for loving kindness.
Endless.
It's so helpful. It's really all of them. Driving is so challenging.
It's all on the
Anything that's
freeway.
challenging,
It's all on the
anything that's
freeway.
challenging is an opportunity
Yeah,
for practice.
that's true.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you because I know you've given talks on, there's one talk, bringing compassion and mindfulness into daily life, introduction to the Jewish practice of Musar. So you just answered that question, which is, hey, you're on the freeway. Any opportunity you have where there's some discomfort is a great opportunity to practice all of those things.
Or on the side streets, the main intersections when somebody cuts you off, or being the light is turning yellow.
What do I do? Lights
Yeah.
turning yellow. Absolutely.
Somebody wants to make a left turn in front of you. What do? Somebody's trying to cut in. I mean, LA is notorious for aggressive driving.
Mm-hmm.
So again, and everybody's in a rush, and often me. That's another thing. Talk about noticing that, if I give myself a little more time before I leave my house to get to that doctor's appointment or that meeting, wow, that actually will make for a much better drive. I won't get so stressed out. That's a simple thing. But how long did it take me to figure that out?
Yeah. It's interesting because I was feeling my body thinking, and I could feel it just tightening up a little bit. And then I had to, take a little moment of interruption there. But another question, which we don't have to get into, is why is that more difficult than something about being in the car on the highway when those things happen that are much more aggravating to us, self-aggravating, we'll call it, than other interactions. What's going on there under the surface? I have some theories on it, but I have a more important question to ask you than that. Because I wanted to talk a little bit about prayer. So I'm going to change gears a little bit.
Okay.
So I read a text of a podcast that you did with Jonathan Slater about prayer. And there was something there that struck me as very beautiful about your prayer practice. I don't know how many years ago this was. So this is a quote from that podcast. And I'm quoting a great rabbi named Rabbi Ruth Sohn. The quote is, "But where I am now, and it's been working really well, is I now really give myself permission to be more free-form with what I'm doing. But the basic commitment is to show up and to spend at least 10 minutes, ideally closer to 20 minutes, in an open-ended way. So it can always be more, but at least I'm showing up for about 10 minutes outdoors for some kind of combination of personal prayer and working with liturgy." And then you say several prayers. That's the end of the quote. And then you put on a prayer shawl. You take refuge with God. You connect deeply with nature. And sometimes that alone might be enough for just what you need. So what I got out of that, well, I got a lot out of that, but this concept of intention, devotion, surrender, being in the moment with nature. I was wondering if you wanted to comment about that.
Yeah, that's, thank you. It was actually not that long ago.
Okay.
It was a few months ago.
Okay.
And it's a practice that has really evolved. I think that's important. That is, in Judaism, there's a well-known tension in relation to prayer between keva, that which is fixed, and kavanah, intention, the alive intentionality and spirit of prayer. And the rabbis in our tradition talk about the importance of both and how to have both, how to make room for both. And I feel like I've really lived that and continue to live that tension. That is, too much of one pulls me out of the richness of the the full potential of the experience, whether it's too much commitment to that which is fixed, not just showing up, but saying all these words. They can become rote just so easily. And the whole point of prayer is to take us out of rote living and to wake us up to the miracle of life and gratitude and to be awake. The purpose of prayer is to help us wake up. And there is some great value, just like coming to meditation every morning, to having a regular prayer practice. But the greatest challenge there is that it so easily becomes rote. So how to avoid that? How to keep the prayer experience alive? So I do all those things that you said. Ideally, being outside and giving myself permission. That has been really important in recent years, to not stick with the set liturgy, but to use some of it, but also look at, sort of lift up my eyes and see who created these, to quote Isaiah, to look, for me, the natural world is really, in some ways, my first and primary sanctuary still. It's just, it is where I find most easily that transformative shift to waking up into gratitude and aliveness and connection. And so going out to the garden and looking for what's new today, what's growing, what might I notice today that I haven't noticed before, and being ready for something, ready to discover, ready to be surprised,
Being
ready to be
curious.
amazed,
Being curious.
being curious. Yeah, being curious.
Yeah.
And there's certain prayer practices within the morning prayer, which one that I shared there that is really, really precious to me right now is the beginning of the paragraph before the Shema, where it's probably the best known Jewish prayer which is really a declaration. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Listen, Israel, Adonai, our God, Adonai is one, the living presence, our God, our divine. The living presence is one, that invitation to open up to the one, the big interconnected oneness. But what comes before is the theme of love, God's love for us. And that paragraph begins, Ahava Rabba Ahavtana, with great love, we have loved you. Ahavtana, with great. And opening up to that experience of divine love. Whoa, why didn't somebody tell me that was in the prayer book when I was a kid? But at any rate, why don't we tell more people about that now? Because that's the opening up to divine love that's invited there. So I really, as part of my morning sit and as part of my morning prayer, I spend time with that, opening up to receive, to really be filled with that divine flow of love energy, life-giving love, and ideally to feeling the filling up to a point of overflowing, and being able to step into the day engaging with the world from a place of fullness, from a place of fullness overflowing, a heart open to receive and to give love.
Thank you. So, just another reminder of why I do these podcasts. So the other word that either you used or I used, didn't really matter, is surrender. And surrender to something bigger than us, not just bigger, not just physically bigger, but bigger energy.
Yeah.
Use the word living presence or Adonai or and Buddhism certainly has that also, surrender. Because if
Yeah.
you're if it's all about
Yeah.
me, I, there's not a lot of surrender going on there. There's more
Yeah.
and surrender is opening and compassion for ourselves and others. And I find as a Westerner that to be the hardest thing for me.
Wow.
And maybe even as a male, maybe even
Hmm.
as someone growing up in Brooklyn, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons. And when I'm able to do it, you just feel better.
Yeah.
But there's so much stuff preventing that, and that kind of gets back to your letter versus the spirit. It's like, one day we're all going to pass this world, and we're going to go and we're going to probably answer for some of the things we've done. You're going to stand before God, and He's not going to say to you, when you said the Shema, you didn't quite get that second word right.
Mm.
Not what it's going to be about. Or you missed that day. You didn't spend the whole half hour. You was only 20. It's not, it's going to be more like, hey, I felt your love. You're there. You're one with me. You know, it just kind of puts things in perspective in terms of what we strive to do, which is, devotion, intention,
Yes.
love,
Devotional
surrender,
practice.
compassion,
Yes.
not, hey, you didn't get that sentence right.
No. Yeah. Yes. Devotional practice. Yeah. Devotion. What a word. What a way of living. And we don't have enough of it.
Yeah. And what I found is, I'll speak for myself, it needs to be cultivated.
Yes.
It's not like a switch on and off. And
Yeah.
you look at I'll be honest, you look at some great people, and you are on my list. You have that ability to, it's very inspiring, that devotion and that love and that compassion. It flows from you. And I've seen that in other great people. And it
Mm.
doesn't matter what religion, by the way.
It doesn't matter what
It's
religion.
just a
Absolutely.
beautiful thing. It's just so
Yeah.
beautiful. But for some of us, it needs to be cultivated, because it doesn't come as easily. And
I,
I want it,
I
but
think for most of us,
but
I
maybe
don't know.
okay,
I mean, there's
okay,
some people, I agree, there definitely are some people who come to it naturally, who don't need all this spiritual practice, but I think
right,
a lot of us do. By the way, surrender, one of the places I find it in in Jewish liturgy is in that same, well, not that same, in the Amidah, another key, sort of the heart of a service, whether morning, afternoon, or evening, morning, afternoon. Um, there's one, there are 19 different themes there, and one is gratitude. And in the prayer for gratitude that begins, Modim anachnu lach, we give you thanks. There's a phrase in there, Al chayenu hamisurim biyadecha, for our lives. It's usually translated, for our lives that are in your hands.
mm,
For our lives that are in your hands. But what it really is saying in the Hebrew, as I understand it, it's for our lives, hamisurim, that are surrendered
mm,
into your hands.
mm-hmm,
Whoa.
mm-hmm,
For our, I say those words really with the invitation of surrender.
mm-hmm,
That's what those words
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
suggest to
mm-hmm.
me, that I am standing before the ultimate, and I'm acknowledging how much is out of my control. Is it really in the control of a divine being? I don't really think so, but it's in the hands of this interconnected, bigger, the interconnection of all that is, was, and will be, in
Mm-hmm.
some big sense. It's not in my hands. A lot is in my hands, but we tend to, I find it, it's so easy to wish we had control where we don't, and to completely miss all the ways that we really do have so many choices to make that make a difference. So
Ruth,
can
it's
I
not
get
it,
clearer on that?
it's not what you think, Ruth.
It's not what you think. That's right. It's not what you think. It's not what we think. That's right.
Yeah, I think, coming from the West, the concept of
Mm.
surrender has a negative connotation.
Yes.
That's the problem. There's a
But it's about
language, there's a
letting
language
go
and
and opening up to something bigger.
language and a cultural barrier.
Yes,
But
that's right.
like anything else, it can be overcome. And Buddhist has the same. Every religion has the same thing: this sense of surrender, not to a person, not to someone who's bigger or bully or stronger, but to a presence. I like that.
Yeah.
That's a great interpretation or translation. I like the
I
translation.
wonder if sometimes we're just holding on. We don't even know what we're holding on to, but we're just, because like when I say the word surrender and just open up to a kind of letting go, what am I even letting go of? I'm not even sure.
We're letting go. I'm going to answer that for you right
In
now,
this moment,
definitively. Definitively, I'm
what
going to
am
give
I
you the.
letting go of in this moment? Expectation, a desire to control.
I think we're letting go of the self.
Mhm.
Our very strong sense of self, me, me, me,
Yeah,
my
yeah,
grasping,
I think so too.
and that habit, and those habits are contributive to
Mhm.
the sense of self. So, from a Buddhist perspective, we believe, when someone says, "Do you have a self?" Everyone goes, "Yeah." Well, show it to me. Well, and they describe it, and it's a permanent thing, and it's me, and it's self. The Buddhist perspective is, yeah, we do have a self, but it's not what you think. There it is again. It's a constantly changing,
Yeah.
constantly moving target based upon how we view ourselves. I'm a good father. I'm a good teacher. I'm this. I'm that. I'm not good at this. I have my fear of heights. I have all these things that can, and it changes as you can see. But the more we hold on to those things, the stronger that sense of self, the harder it is to surrender.
Mhm.
And when we can rid ourselves of the grasping and the attachments and the desires and aversions, and they start to fade, then that self is, when you speak with great human beings, the Dalai Lama, and I'm sure great rabbis as well, they don't have this strong sense of, you just feel love.
Yes. So that brings me back. That's where I was going. That's what
Okay,
I was hearing too. And I want to go back to what I was talking about, the Ahava Rabbah, the invitation to open to
beautiful.
divine love, the Shema, which opens then to the Shema, this opening up to the interconnected oneness of all. I feel the great need to say that the next step, which is part of a really important three-step whole, the next is in the same breath, if you will, Be'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, you shall love the living presence, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your muchness. Me'odecha, ma'od is very, with all your veriness, with your kishkas, with everything in you, love, open to receive, open to the oneness from that place of love, and then open to give. So it's like the breath, in and out, opening to receive, and then with the fullness release, and then receive, open to receive. I mean, it's endless, but it's really, I mean, what a beautiful attempt, what a beautiful liturgical drama inviting us into the flow of love, where we are receiving and giving, giving, receiving. It doesn't matter where we are in one moment. We're part of a flow. We're here. This is what we're here for. This is what we as human beings are here on earth for, to learn over the course of a lifetime. And we need to learn it over the course of a lifetime. And with our great intellect that gets in the way of this capacity, perhaps, how to live, how to love better, how to get better and better at receiving and giving love and helping each other along the way. That's what we're here for.
Okay, so this has been an amazing gift to me. Thank you very much for being on the podcast. I got more than I bargained for, and I am great appreciation, very inspiring, and I know it'll be very inspiring to others as well.
Thank you so much, Morty. It's been really, I didn't know where this was going to go either. And you're a wonderful conversation partner and fellow traveler. And it's a pleasure to meet you and engage with you in this way. Thank you so much.
Stay in touch. Stay well.
Take care.
Be well. Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed my talk with Rabbi Ruth Sohn. I am so grateful for her participation. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the It's Not What You Think podcast. That really helps us to continue to produce these episodes and invite other guests from around the world. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or would like to hear any specific guests on the podcast, please share my email, mortylevine@gmail.com, or visit mortylevine.com. Remember, it's not what you think.